across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good evening. It is Petrie here with you through until 1 o'clock as usual. And coming up at midnight, of course, is our phone in. It's a full hour of calls. That's it. Nothing else, no guests, no nothing. Just you and me. And it is still the only hour that you can do that. So it's just conversation between you and me. And we have some doozies. I mean, we really do. If you've not listened, you never know which direction these calls and callers are going to go in. And certainly last week it was utter hilarity on a topic that I thought was going to be quite serious. So I don't think that'll be the case for tomorrow morning, though, because I do want to discuss with you the burqa. Now, this story has been knocking around for a few days now, and I have I've sort of avoided it because it's a conversation as old as time, really. But I do think that maybe it is time that we had this conversation again. The last time I had this conversation was on another radio station, and I was absolutely blown away by the number of men that called to say that they didn't want, Muslim men, saying that they didn't want their women to wear burqas, but they did anyway. So I was surprised by that. I'd be surprised to hear that again, because we always think in this country that the burqa is worn by Muslim women at the behest of the men in their life, that the men in their life have told them to cover up. And that's certainly the case when we look at places like Afghanistan, where women are covered from head to toe, and that is because the men instruct them to. They have to by law. And if they don't, or if a bit of hair is showing, then they get beaten in the streets. So it is not, for me, the symbol of choice. It is not, for me, a symbol of togetherness. It is not, for me, a symbol of equality. It just isn't. And as I was saying to Kevin, because I've spoken about this, I thought, well, I ought really to put my money where my mouth is, and I borrowed a burqa, and I honestly can't tell you how awful I felt, how isolated, it was just horror. For me, it was horror. It was utter horror. I couldn't smile at anyone. I couldn't communicate with anyone. And something like, was it 80% of our communication is visual. We see what people are thinking. We trust people whose faces we can see. We talk to people whose faces we can see. I found it very, 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 very isolating. And it would not be my choice. And it would not be, I couldn't believe that what I felt could be any woman's choice. But I'm not from that culture. I'm not from that background. So I would like to hear from you if you are, and if you do wear the burqa. I mean, that is the full face, not the niqab, which is just the hair covered and the body covered, but your face covered. So I'd like to hear from you if you are from that culture, and if you're not, what does it make you feel when you see somebody wearing a burqa, and do you think that it should be a choice, and where do you think it shouldn't be a choice? For example, I think it absolutely should not be a choice in a classroom. I think there is no place for teachers to be covered up. I think it shouldn't be a choice in a hospital environment. I think there are other places where it shouldn't be a choice. But if it is genuinely a choice to wear one down the high street, what are we saying? So that's what I want to talk about. So please give me a call, whichever side of this argument you're on. You know I'll give you a fair hearing. 03444 499 1000 is the number that you need. Right, before that, we have the fabulous John Boothman on the programme. He's going to be going through Tuesday's newspapers. Caroline Faraday will be joining us live from LA. We're going to also be chatting with Alex Three Lines Irons, a TalkSport presenter and producer, about the weekend's sport. But first, we are heading to LA early in the programme. This weekend, of course, protesters have clashed with immigration and customs enforcement agents as officials arrested dozens of undocumented migrants, leading to over 100 arrests across Los Angeles so far. Now, when we hear 100 or 200 arrests, those are the people that ICE arrested. The numbers of protesters that have been arrested is way smaller than that. So I just wanted to make that clear, because a lot of people are conflating the two numbers inaccurately. US President Donald Trump ordered the deployment of 2,000 National Guard troops on Sunday. 300 turned up. I'm fascinated as to why only 300 turned up. Was it that 700 refused to do it? I don't know. This was not supported by Gavin Newsom, the Democratic California government. Now that is important. Donald Trump only has the right to deploy National Guard onto the streets of Washington. He does not have the right to do that without governmental approval anywhere else that is state controlled. So he didn't deploy them on January 6th, but he has deployed them without the consent of Gavin Newsom in LA. Now, he used something called Title 10 in order to try to override Gavin Newsom, and that is to protect ICE and the police. But Gavin Newsom said they didn't need it. So to get more information on this, Karen Cox joins me now, who's Professor Emerita at the History of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Professor, thank you so much for joining me. Look, the first thing we lose when only a few people are reporting on this is perspective and truth. Can you talk us through the sort of the timeline of this? Because what I saw, and I watch American stuff a lot, it was really kind of peaceful for a very long time, this protest.
Yes, it has been peaceful. And as a matter of fact, the Los Angeles Police Department issued a press release saying that everything had been peaceful. So there really wasn't this disruption, at least not the way that the president described it.
Okay, so what talk me through again this Title 10 and why Gavin Newsom is now taking the presidency, Donald Trump, to court.
Well, I mean, he's taken him to court because this has to do with the way our system of government works. You know, it's a we have federal powers and state powers, and basically Governor Newsom is saying, you know, that the president is in violation of state sovereignty, and so and that's why he plans to sue the administration, because he has to work with the governor of the state, and because it's actually the governor of any state that has the authority to bring in National Guard troops. And he, as said repeatedly, this was not necessary.
So the Title 10 is Donald Trump cited. If he'd cited the Insurrection Act, he would have had the right to do it, right?
Yes.
But not under this title. That was in order to protect ICE and the LAPD.
Well, he seems to be more interested in protecting ICE and the police than the people on the streets themselves. I mean, I'm sure you've seen, even journalists were being shot with these rubber bullets, or these things that are not supposed to hurt anyone. Not kill anyone, but they're using these things against journalists. I mean, it's something that we're really not used to seeing. It's very ramped up. It's very militarized. It feels like a police state, which I think is the point.
And regarding the number of protesters that have been arrested, those numbers are relatively small, right?
Yes, because the protests have been peaceful, and this is the thing that's continued to, this is what came from the LAPD. I mean, if the police department is telling you that it's peaceful, where is this other, the scare coming from, other than the president of the United States? The fact that he's looking for a fight. He's looking for an opportunity to send in troops. So he can use the power of the presidency, but also to militarize cities. And so I think it's that Gavin Newsom is not someone who wants to be pushed around or is going to allow himself to be pushed around. And so he's, basically calling his bluff on this and plans to sue. But this is the thing, to distract people with these kinds of things, even if nothing is going on, even if the protest is peaceful. He's using this as a way to gain more power.
I mean, Gavin Newsom has said, I saw him speaking earlier, saying that Donald Trump has threatened to arrest him. And he's saying, come on then, come and arrest me, because we're sick and tired of this, of your bullying. We know that Trump doesn't like the state of California. It's a blue state. He's agitated towards this blue state. And he is being, his typical self when talking about Newsom, that he's a bit of a loser, that he's failing, his entire estate, the whole area is a mess. All of these immigrants are criminals. Who's buying that?
I don't know anyone who's buying that other than his most loyal followers. People who get their news from one or two sources, either Fox News or Newsmax, where they basically, can toe the party line, and they give, and they, support Trump's actions. But most people don't, aren't thinking that. I think it's really, it's kind of interesting right now, because we are in a place where lots of rumors are going on throughout social media, and people probably find it difficult to determine what's true from what's false. But I think that, having the governor of California step up and speak out and clarify what is happening and what has been happening, and that essentially what he sees the president doing is basically sowing chaos.
What's in it for Donald Trump apart from a power grab? What's in it for him? I mean, we have a term that was coined in this country. It's a good day to bury bad news, right? This feels like a lot of distraction. It feels like maybe we're supposed to be distracted from the Epstein file, a comment by Musk, that we're meant to be distracted from something else. Just because I've been watching politics for a long time, that's what it feels like.
Well, it is. I mean, it seems like every day he's doing something to distract us from the fact that this bill that's going through our Congress, which is past the House and now is in the Senate, is really going to do a lot of damage to people's lives. He's trying to distract from the damage that has been done by Elon Musk, and so he's often doing that kind of thing. He's trying to appear as a strong man in this situation. He loves the attention. I mean, that's his thing, right? His ego requires more and more attention, and this is I think this is part of what he's doing. He's wanting to have a show of force, and of course, on his birthday coming up, he's having this big military parade like dictators in China and Russia have. So it is all a distraction. It is a distraction from the really horrible things that are going on. Also, the fact that his policies are not popular, even among the people who voted him into office.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, but it has been on my mind that Donald Trump ordered 2,000 National Guard to report for duty in downtown LA. 300 turned up. Now, there's been a lot of stuff going on about how all these men and women, their duty is to the Constitution. They have a right to refuse what they determine as illegal orders, that they will not be protected in future by saying I was just following orders, that they have the right to morally refuse an order. Do we know why only 300 turned up?
We don't right now. I've just hearing those numbers that you just, that's the first I've heard of it. So I don't know that you know, what personal choices some of these men and women may have made. They only need enough to make a show, right, of it, right? And you know, and that's the kind of thing that will get clipped for, you know, for video and then spread across conservative media.
Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, has declared that he's got 500 Marines on standby. I mean, 500 Marines are always on standby, right? That is, again, a shallow boast. If they were ever deployed, what does that tell you about America? If they were deployed on the streets of a city in America, what does that tell you about America?
It tells us that we're moving closer to a police state and that the president is a dictator. The president is an authoritarian, and he's not, and our democracy is in big trouble. And we need people to peacefully protest. We need our representatives to stand up to this. And this is where I think a lot of people feel like we're falling short, is that the elected representatives who are supposed to hold the president to account are not doing their job. And so it's clearly very upsetting for a lot of people. We are concerned about our democracy, but we also, I think the vast majority of Americans still believe in this democracy, are willing to, you know, fight for it. And fights look like different in different ways. You know, it could be a peaceful protest. It could be writing an op-ed. It could be a number of things. But I think the thing is to be fearless in this moment.
A lot of people are talking about this as a tipping point. I rather see it as an escalation. Just one step on a ladder of what could happen next. Do you think that you are heading towards a point of no return with Donald Trump and with the people of America?
Well, as a historian, I'm not to predict the future, but
but we have to learn from the past in order not to.
We do have to learn from the past, but this is unprecedented, as you know. And so I think that the fact that the governor has he called, not just of the president, he called the bluff of Tom Homan, who's the quote unquote border czar, and Tom Homan backed off of his comments. I think that Governor Newsom is a very savvy politician. People know this, and he knows that probably looks good for him, you know, to push back. And he recognizes a moment. I think a lot of people on my feed, in my social media feed, are saying that he senses that the ground is shifting. And so we're going to see. We won't know right now, but I think the fact that that the governor is challenging Trump in this way. A lot of people are challenging Trump. The attorneys general, the Democratic attorneys general across the nation have joined forces in order to press against what's going on. So they're using the legal system to do that. And it just remains to be seen. These things have happened so quickly in ways that most Americans didn't anticipate, in ways that even pundits did not anticipate. I think we're all doing the best we can to speak about these things, to turn out when we can, and be supportive of one another. And you see that in immigrant communities where people show up and lock hands and protect individuals from being taken away from ICE, and the way that information is being shared in these communities. And so it's hard to say at this point. It really is hard to say. I don't want to suggest that this is the tipping point where we go into full-blown authoritarianism, although I think some people are starting to say these things, that these are authoritarian moves. But I think there's still a lot of us who are willing to say, hold up a second.
I mean, it certainly looks like the playbook. And many people are suggesting that that Donald Trump's aim is martial law, so he could suspend the Constitution and therefore operate fully as a dictator. It has been done before. Russia did it. Germany did it, to suspend their version of the Constitution. At what point is it too late to stop that?
I'm going to say it's never too late right now, because I don't think we're there yet. I think that, when someone like the governor of California pushes back in the very public way that he did, that gives other people strength, and strength within his own state, but strength across the country. I think a lot of people have been wanting someone to do this, to as they say here, to clap back at him, at the administration, and so, when someone can show you that strength, I think that others can follow. And so and again, there are things being done behind the scenes that we are not even aware of at this moment. Like I said, I don't know what the plans are, but again, the attorneys general, the Democratic attorneys general, are working together to try to, put things in place or push back legally against what is happening. So it's not as if we've all, like, Americans have rolled over and said this is okay. We're not doing that, and I think that there are a lot of people at work in ways that we don't even know yet. But it's good to see our representatives speak up, whether it's Jasmine Crockett, whether it's AOC, whether it's the governor of California. We need those leaders who are going to stand up to this, that gives Americans who are really concerned about what's going on, give them more strength.
Just very briefly, if you can, as a history professor, do you feel you're in a moment of history?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This is not anything that's, there have been things like America First, the pro-Nazi parties in the United States in the 1930s. But what's going on now is completely different. We are seeing our democracy threatened in ways that we'd never seen before. And I certainly feel that. And I think, that's why you and I are having this conversation, because it is palpable. And so, yes, I absolutely believe I'm living through a historic moment, and it will be interesting how we come out on the other side.
Well, you've got my support to come out the other side better than where you are at the moment. Thank you very much indeed. Karen Cox there, Professor Emeritus of History at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. A quick break, back in a second.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is...
Hi there, this is Talk and it's Petrie here with you, and time to find out now how you could be in with a chance of winning a weekend away in Munich. Oh, I love Munich, it's beautiful. At the end of May to watch the biggest game in European football, the Champions League final. We're also putting 5k in your pocket to spend however you want.
Hello, look who it is, it's me, Andy Goldstein. And here at TalkSport, we're gearing up for the Club World Cup in the United States. And to celebrate, we've got 2 tickets to the final in New York on July the 13th to give away. We're going to sort out the flights, we're going to sort out the accommodation, and we're going to give you £5 spending money to spend however you want. How about that?
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, all you have to do to enter is text the word football to 83338. Do that by the 13th of June at 11 p.m, and that's it, you're done, you're in the draw. A text will cost £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have bill payer's permission. Or you can just send your name and number by post to Club World Cup Final Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, and it must arrive by 5 p.m. on the 18th of June.
This is a TalkSport limited competition run on TalkSport Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
That's not Munich. That's not Munich. I mean, Munich is gorgeous. I mean, so was New York. So obviously that's New York. And I've been given the wrong information here. But listen, don't miss out on this incredible giveaway. It would be a shame to. So I'm sure Munich's coming up. Well, there'll be a Munich one a little bit later. Right, coming up at midnight is the phone-in, and I want to talk to you about the burqa. And I want to know whether you think that it should be a choice or not. And if you don't, why don't you? I mean, I put my cards on the table. I've worn one and I hated every single living second of it. I have to be completely honest with you. It just upset me, left me feeling isolated. It was the worst couple of hours of my life. I was meant to wear it for a day, I couldn't do it. I think I'd have had a nervous breakdown if I did. But I don't come from a community where it's perhaps more normalised, or I may have been wearing one for many years. I've got to get used to it as a child or whatever. So I'd like to hear from you if you do indeed wear the full face covering, the burqa, and why you wear it. And your experience can't be the same as mine, otherwise you would choose not to if indeed it is a choice. So that's what we're going to be talking about. I don't see it as a garment of choice or freedom or equality or any of those things, but I'm prepared to listen to somebody who has perhaps more of an understanding of it. So please give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Need to tell you that calls are charged at the national rate, but we do call you back.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, this is Talk and it's Petrie here with you, and joining me now is Alex Three Lions Irons TalkSport presenter and producer. Hello there.
Hello, lovely to see you again. At least you acknowledge that I exist, unlike Jeremy Kyle, so that's a good.
Oh,
good
yeah,
sign.
no, I stopped for a hug, didn't I?
You
on
did,
the way to
yes.
make up. Yeah. What were you loitering there for, anyway?
I just finished working on Drive, so I was just
down in the dungeon.
Down in the TalkSport dungeon,
Yeah.
bunker, whatever it's called these days.
Yeah.
Just gathering my bearings before heading home.
I thought you might have been waiting there for me, obviously.
And that as well, yes.
And that as well. Let's talk about a snooze fest.
Yeah, despite England winning 1-0, that was against Andorra, who are a team who are ranked in the FIFA World Rankings 173rd. England only won 1-0. Take that into consideration. Scotland played Liechtenstein earlier this afternoon and beat them 3-0. Harry Kane, the England captain, said that his side got away with it in their 1-0 win against Andorra in a performance that wasn't good enough. He scored the only goal in the game. That was in the 50th minute. They played the game in Barcelona because Andorra's stadium isn't big enough for England when they come to town, so they go ground share with Espanyol, who play in Barcelona. England were booed by some of their fans at half-time and at full-time as well, while manager Thomas Tuchel said his side lacked the seriousness and urgency that is needed in a World Cup qualifier. Of course, England are 3 from 3. They top the group with 9 points, although Serbia, who are going to be one of the close contenders to take that top spot from England, haven't played a game yet. So you could say that it's not a false start, but England have had a good start, and we'll see how Serbia shape up in the next couple of weeks.
So even though it was really boring, England
was
won.
dull. Yeah. They didn't look like scoring for most of it. England had a lot of possession. I think they had 85% possession of the ball in the entire game. And just, they knocked the ball around. They looked dangerous in parts, but just looked tired. And you could put that down to the Premier League players having a long season. Of course, quite a few of the players that are playing for England are now jetting off to America to play in the Club World Cup, which kicks off next week. And also the fact that they're playing Andorra, who, are 173rd in the world, have some of the, some of the players aren't even full-time. Some of them are semi-professional. They have other jobs. They play in the 5th tier of Spanish football, some of them. And England could only put 1 goal past them. But
that's pretty embarrassing, right? I mean...
I don't know if it's embarrassing. It would have been embarrassing if they'd lost 1-0 to Andorra. I think that would have been more embarrassing than them winning. But it was just a bit like, come on, really? We've meant to have this manager who's meant to win everything. And, we're 3 from 3. Great, brilliant. But England just haven't really looked like they've been firing in all cylinders.
Maybe they were just arrogant and couldn't be bothered.
It could be a bit of that. Some of the players potentially not taking it seriously.
Yeah.
Against, Andorra only took a handful of fans with them. England sold about 7,000 tickets. So it was more or less like a home game, but in Barcelona. So it's a bit of an odd one. But with England have got a friendly tomorrow against Cameroon. That's in England. That's taking place at the City Ground, the home of Nottingham Forest. They play Senegal. And, even though it's only a friendly, they're a much tougher opposition than Andorra, and you think they'll probably take it a lot more seriously.
No. I think that Andorra obviously shouldn't be embarrassed to only lose 1-0.
I think they've done really well considering that some of the teams they play against, and even teams that are not as good on paper as England, and they lose a lot heavier than that.
Yeah.
You've also got minnows like San Marino, like Liechtenstein, as I've said before. Luxembourg were one of them. They've done pretty well over the past couple of years and have really threatened to take a couple of qualifying spots for the Euros of the past couple of years. So, those minnows of football, when they do play the big boys, they do want to make a good account for themselves. And even though they didn't have a lot of the ball on Saturday, you could say that they did make a good account of themselves. So congratulations, Andorra.
Yeah, congratulations to you. Look, speaking of managers, Spurs have sacked theirs and are looking forward to a new one.
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, Ange Postecoglou was celebrating the fact that He'd won a trophy in his second season, like he said he would when he joined Tottenham Hotspur, and was promising when speaking to the Spurs crowd from the parade on the Friday after, saying that season 3 was going to be even better. That's not happening. Spurs have now sacked Ange Postecoglou and have opened talks with Brentford head coach Thomas Frank following that sacking. He's emerged as the lead contender to replace Postecoglou, and Brentford would be entitled to compensation for the Dane, with sources indicating it could cost Tottenham more than £10 million to get him off his contract at Brentford, which runs all the way through until 2027. Thomas Frank would be a good get for Spurs. He's been at Brentford for quite some time. He's been there since 2018. He's guided them into the Premier League, winning the Championship playoff at Wembley back in 2021, and got them to the playoff final in 2020, where he bumped into a very good Fulham side who beat them 2-1. Not one to brag, but as a Fulham fan, we'd like to dig it in there, especially as we're Brentford's rivals as well. So they've done pretty well, especially on a small budget. Brentford aren't the biggest teams in the Premier League. They play at a stadium which is relatively new, which only holds about 16,000. So he's done pretty well with a small side, and going to Spurs will give him a bit more of a free rein. He knows how to work with a smaller budget, and although Daniel Levy, the Spurs owner, will probably give him a bit more to play with, he really knows how to work his magic on teams that on paper don't particularly look like they'll perform that well.
It's such a coincidence as well, because it's 10 million to release me from my contract.
And mine. I haven't even got a contract, but still, I'll take the 10 million.
Such a coincidence. Anyway, let's talk about the Premier League's first black referee. I can't believe this. He's passed away at the age of 65 years.
Yeah, Uriah Reine, sad story. He passed away at the age of 65. He was the Premier League's first black referee. He joined the list of match officials in 1994 and oversaw more than 300 games, including 175 in the Premier League between 1997 and 2008. Anti-discrimination charity Kick It Out said Uriah Reine was a trailblazer in every sense, adding he'll always be a Premier League legend by becoming its first black referee, providing leadership, talent and visibility that proved inspirational to many. There's a picture that's been going around over the past 24 hours of him kind of holding Roy Keane when he was a player by the scruff of the neck in his referee's uniform. And especially as I grew up in that time, especially like started getting into football around about 97, 98, 99, and Uriah Reine was one of those figures in football that you always, you noticed and you saw and you respected even as a child. And it's such a shame to hear that after a short illness, he's passed away at the age of 65.
His family, isn't it? His
family had said that he'd been privately battling a recent cancer diagnosis prior to his death, and he was up in the city he was born in Sheffield up until that time.
Oh, bless him. Scott Carson has left the best job in football. I thought you had that.
Unfortunately, you'd think that, but no.
Think that?
I would say that Scott Carson has the best, or he did have the best job in football following his Man City exit. He was the third choice goalkeeper at Manchester City, and he is until his contract expires in the summer. He's had 6 trophy-laden years and has only played twice for Manchester City. The 39-year-old former England goalkeeper was part of the City squad that won 11 trophies, including the treble in 2022-23. So in his time at Manchester City, he has been in goal for 117 minutes. In that time, he has won a Club World Cup, 1 Super Cup, the Community Shield, 2 League Cups, an FA Cup, 1 Champions League and 4 Premier League titles. He was also at Liverpool when they won the Champions League, the FA Cup and Super Cup. And this is, of course, a player who has only played for just about 2 hours of football since joining Manchester City in about 2019, 2018.
And he's been paid all the way through that?
He's been paid all the way through that. He's got medals for every single one of them. That is why he has got the best job in football.
That is so unfair, isn't it? That must be
I know.
A lot of people really have.
If someone had told me growing up that I could have been a third choice goalkeeper for a Premier League football club, I would have been like, yeah, all right, I'll take that.
Yeah, all right, then I'll do that.
I win all this stuff and I get all this money, fine.
I think I would
You just
as well.
sit there. You turn up for training and go, Do you need me to play this weekend? No, that's all right, fine. I'll just support from the bench. That's what I'm good for these days. Oh, I'm getting paid anyway. All right, cool. Cheers, thanks. I'll get a medal. Oh, lovely, thank you.
That's amazing. That is pretty. If you can do it, that is pretty cool. If you can get away with it.
I'm jealous. I want to be friends with this man.
Alex, thank you. Oh, listen, I've been watching some of your TikToks. If you're into football,
amazing.
Do have a look at Alex Irons' TikTok page, because he does some really nice reporting of all the Premier League games that you've been.
I do a bit more than that. I did the FA Cup this year, followed the FA Cup from the extra preliminary round, following the winner all the way through to the final. If you're a bit of a train nerd, I follow the London Underground Football League. They've got a league between 12 teams, which is 2 divisions of 6. They've got their cup final tomorrow, so I'm going into Market Road pitches to cover that tomorrow. I look at a club in every London borough, and I've got some other stuff I've got planned for the summer. So,
I mean, but I'm just saying that even as not a big football fan, they're very nicely put together reports.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed them, so thank you very much indeed. Alex, thank you. I'll see you very soon, perhaps loitering at the top of the escalator as I found him this evening. Quick break, back, heading off to LA in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, this is Talk, and it's Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock. And just to remind you that coming up at the top of the hour is John Boothman, who is the political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. He will be here for the full hour going through the newspapers. Now though, let's cross over to Caroline Faraday, live from LA, award-winning entertainment journalist based in LA. Well, more than entertainment journalist, Caroline, because your eyes on the ground in. It seems like LA is really going through it. I mean, first of all, you had the fires, and now this. What is happening?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, unless you were in downtown LA, you wouldn't notice it. But in the last, 48 hours, obviously, we have got these very striking images of protests, and some of those protests boiling over with scenes of violence in downtown LA. To put it into context, those areas are largely immigrant areas. So LA County has about 10 million residents, and 1 million of those are immigrants, right? And there are two, I know this gets right into this conversation about immigration, but there are the thought process and the way that it works in Los Angeles, and it's always worked, is it's what's called a sanctuary city. And that means that for immigrants, some of whom, by the way, would have been brought here by their parents, it's much more like a situation of the where people came over to the UK. It's very different to the immigration issues that I think you're facing in the UK and that people talk about in the UK right now. So this is very much like part of the culture of LA, in the same way that there is an Indian restaurant on every corner in the UK. There is a Mexican restaurant. There are tacos, sold in the street. It is a really huge part of the culture of Los Angeles, is this Mexican culture. And these neighborhoods are largely Hispanic neighborhoods. And the people who live there are neighbors. They've lived there for, they haven't just arrived. They've been there mostly like their whole lifetimes. And they are scared because now, I mean, for instance, a friend of mine's husband, he runs a construction company. A lot of people who work for him, they pay their taxes, by the way. This is the big misconception. They pay their taxes, they work. There is a path for undocumented people to have this kind of moment of sanctuary. Now, sanctuary means that if, for instance, you were undocumented and you were in the unfortunate situation where you were sexually assaulted or something happened to you, that you could go to the police, report that crime without fear that the police will use the information of whether or not you have the correct documentation to deport you. And that has always, there's this kind of been this understanding for decades in Los Angeles. Donald Trump gets elected on this promise of cracking down on criminals who are immigrants. Those are very different to the people that are being targeted, who are taking their kids to school. Oh, sorry, to go back to my friend, they run a construction company, and the people who work for him are saying, well, we don't want to go to Home Depot. It's like B&Q or Home Base, or go and pick up materials because we're worried that we're going to get picked up by ICE if we do that. So there's all these kind of different factions because the law enforcement in LA won't enforce those immigration laws. That's like a sanctuary situation, but they will enforce public disorder laws. Yeah. And obviously there have been public disorder issues. But anyway, it's tense today down there, but it's not like you saw at the weekend. Whether or not it will grow as the day goes on, because bear in mind, it's not even 3 p.m. here. And generally these kind of things have been heightened up towards the evening. You have seen more immigration vehicles arriving, and that's where you get these tensions. These communities, they don't want them there, but and they have every right to protest and say they don't want them there. People don't want those protests then turning to something violent and to public order dispenses. Nobody wants to see cars being set on fire and property being destroyed and people getting hurt. And certainly a number of journalists who got hurt.
One was literally targeted. You could see her.
Yep,
she was actually targeted. I mean, she wasn't caught in the crossfire. They shot at this.
Well,
whoever it was shot at her.
This is what's great, really, about the world. She had a cameraman whose camera was facing that way, so he could see what was happening behind her, and he happened to be at the right angle where you could see that. Police officer turn his gun and very deliberately fire it at somebody who was very clearly a member
had her back to
delivering
him.
a piece and delivering a piece to camera. I know of 2 other journalists who received rubber bullets in the leg and had to have, one had to have surgery to have it removed. One's a radio reporter. Another one is a photographer,
British,
Nick, and he's a Brit, and he had a big rubber bullet in his leg. And of course, because they're doing stills, you haven't got that image. So who knows whether they were targeted or not? But it makes you wonder.
Yeah, it really does. And but before anybody goes, well, journalists have a right to be there, to record this. We're supposed to be protected by dint
We're also
of
not
what we
being
do.
a nuisance. Like, if this is happening on your doorstep, you want to know what's going on, and we're there to provide the eyes and ears to the public.
Exactly.
And I think, and it's a very dangerous situation to go and report on those things. Very easy to criticise people, but I think all of those people who are going and documenting this first draft of history as they are stood there are being very brave in my eyes.
I completely agree with you.
I'm in my office, keeping safe. Look at me.
Completely agree with you, though. I mean, they are astonishing, and thank goodness for them. And before people go, well, if they're undocumented, but there are children who came across with their parents who haven't been able to get documentation, who are still fighting to get documentation. They may have been here 25, 30 years. So it's not not as simple as people hearing,
It's
they've
not.
come across
It's
the
not
water
as
with
simple
no
as
passport.
you know,
No.
1,200 people arriving on a boat
No.
and then going, oh, well, hang on, you're coming here and getting services, this, that, and the other. That's not what this is.
Yeah.
These are people who work and pay taxes and pay into the system. And that is why the community feels so strongly in their defence, really. That's why you're seeing not all of these people that are out protesting are people who are being targeted by the immigration authorities. No. People are saying, I don't like what I'm seeing. I've seen members of the clergy with their dog collars on down there today. So, you know, it really is quite a cross section.
No, it really is. It's just so disturbing to see. I mean, Ice Agents covering their faces. I mean, how do you know they even? And then fully formed soldiers with really aggressive uniforms on against the American people.
Yeah. Well, we've got Marines now as well, which you're not supposed to use. I'm going to have a big cough. Just brace yourself.
Yeah, I'm bracing. They turned up, the Marines.
Marines, 700 Marines supposed to be arriving.
Well, that's news.
We
knew that they were talking about it, but
it's just all of these politicians who've all got to one up each other now, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that is. I mean, if Marines are on the grounds, I mean, that is. I
don't understand the logistics of that. Where are 700 Marines going to sleep? Where are 700 Marines going to station themselves? Who is going to be the commander of all of this?
Well,
it's not come from the governor. There is no, like, what's the leadership in this situation? But anyway, blah, blah, blah.
But I've also seen that those ICE agents are being kicked out of hotels now. There are a lot of hotels that are saying, we don't want you here. So
as I said, it's not a popular thing to do in Los Angeles, and they have very deliberately gone into areas where it would be inflammatory to do so.
Yeah, well, we know that Trump hates California and hates Newsom, so maybe it was personal. Right, very quickly, I want to hear the latest from the Diddy trial, because that's hotting up as well.
That's not nice either, is it? It's not nice either.
No.
His ex-girlfriend, Jane, she's not called Jane, obviously, says that she's been giving testimony. But what happened before that is that his attorneys, and which is their best chance at kind of getting him out of there, is to just keep on saying, can we have a mistrial, please? So they keep asking for a mistrial. But anyway,
on what basis?
Oh, on the basis that they don't want him to be found guilty, I think. Anyway, they keep saying that, oh, well, you know, this evidence wasn't fair, or, you know, the testimony was demonstrably false of Brianna Bongolan, who accused Coombs of dangling her from her 17th story balcony, was demonstrably false in key respects. If I was prosecuting a case, and I'm not, I'd be delighted to have somebody up there where it was demonstrably false, and you put it in front of the jury, and then you go, well, if you can't believe her, what makes you think you can believe all these other people? But anyway, that's how I would prosecute it, and I'm not the prosecutor. I'm not that's how I defend it. I mean, and I'm not the defender. Anyway, so she dated Coombs from 2021 to 2024. Just at face value, I mean, how does he get all this? I know he's very rich, but he really seems to have no shortage of very attractive girlfriends.
Well, I think that's what happens when you're very rich.
Yeah. Testified that the entertainer, who went by Sly, threatened to release a video of them having sex during a hotel night. He'd recorded the video, and then that person demanded, this was an entertainer in the loosest sense of the terms. But anyway, and then the video was not released. But anyway, she says that she fainted. You know, this testimony from Cassie Ventura, who was one of the first witnesses, and she's the one that Coombs was filmed attacking as she was getting to the lift. She said she fainted after reading her civil lawsuit against Coombs because Jane, as they're calling her for the sake of this trial, said it felt like reading her own sexual trauma. She testified that Coombs made her feel obligated to participate in hotel nights, which involved her having sex with other men at his direction. One hotel night had lasted for more than 3 days. He's facing sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution and racketeering, conspiracy charges, and denied any accusations of wrongdoing, I should say.
How much longer could this go on for, this trial?
Yeah, I don't know how many more witnesses there are, and then how long the jury would take to kind of go through the evidence. I mean,
look, because he's coming off across as a scumbag, isn't he?
I was going to say, these are still the prosecution witnesses. Then presumably there will be defense witnesses. And then presumably there will be a summary from both sides. So it's not about to wrap up anytime soon, and then the jury will go out.
God, well, he's clearly a scumbag, but does that make him a sex trafficker? Who knows? We'll find out. Caroline Faraday, bless your heart. Lovely to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Multiple award-winning entertainment journalist based in LA. Right, coming up, it is John Boothman. He is going to be here in just a few minutes' time to go through the newspapers for Tuesday. So whatever you do, don't go anywhere. I'll be back in just a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, great to have your company, and joining us all the way from Scotland, Bonnie, Scotland, is John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times there. Hello John, how are you?
I'm not bad, how are you?
I'm good, it feels like I haven't seen you for ages.
Yeah, look, I've been very busy. I was heavily involved in the Hamilton by-election, which I think was being pretty comprehensively followed, not just here, but south of the border. So, yeah, it's been a busy time.
Yeah, well, it's no excuse. You know, I'm not. That won't stand again, John. All right, you get one of those. Listen, before we head off into the land of the newspapers, there's been a lot of talk recently about the burqa, and today Kemi Badenoch said that she doesn't speak to women in burqas at constituency surgeries. Now, if it's just Kemi Badenoch in the room, there's no reason for a woman not to remove her face covering. But what do you make of all of this? There's been a lot of, it's been brewing, hasn't it, this whole argument about these face coverings for Muslim women?
Well, of course, it all kicked off last week in the House of Commons with the new Runcorn MP out there saying this is something that should be debated. It said had nothing to do, of course, with the resignation and then reinstatement of Zia Yusuf as the chairman of the Reform UK party. Look, I mean, I find this quite a difficult issue insofar as I don't see this being a huge problem at all, to be quite honest. There's a few thousand people wear the burqa or the niqab across the UK. I was quite amazed that the numbers were so small. Certainly, for my part, I don't see many Muslim women. I think there's, 1.4 million Muslim women in the UK actually wearing these face coverings, either partially covering their face or a burqa, which is, of course, something that covers the whole face and the whole body.
I mean, I think I don't often see women wearing them, but I do see them around in my particular part of London. But I suspect it's probably more sort of city-based, where most of the population of Muslims are. It's just an interesting one to me because I've said this before, but I was doing quite a lot of phone calls, being a woman broadcaster. I can have a unique perspective on this, and so I thought, well, I should wear one, just to, if I'm going to know what I'm talking about, I should wear one. I was meant to wear it for the day. I couldn't. I was in tears. I couldn't wear it for more than a few hours. I couldn't breathe properly. I was breathing in my own air. I couldn't see properly. The reason women are always looking down is because you don't know where you're stepping, because it cuts off your vision. I hated it literally every millisecond of it, and I can't imagine that ever being a choice. I just can't. But if it is a choice, should women be able to choose that? Now, that difficulty for me is this choice born out of cultural demand, so therefore it's not really a choice. It feels like a choice, but it's not really a choice. I mean, do you, if it is a choice, a genuine choice, should women be allowed to?
Well, one argument that might be made is the whole argument about freedom of expression and people being free to dress whatever way they wish, or according to the cultural norms or even the religious norms that they practice. I think, it's an interesting debate. For me, I just worry about the overtones of all of it, and I worry that we are going down, a road of kind of a lack of tolerance of other people, which I do find problematic. But, this is the society we now live in Britain, where these issues are starting to get raised. But I return to my original point. This is not something that affects that many people in the population. It's not something that, I don't see that it should be getting the prominence that it is, to be honest.
I just fear that because it's such a symbol of oppression, isn't it? It's a symbol of, if you look at the way that it is used in Afghanistan, for example, and that is not their choice. That is not. I mean, even in places like Iran and other countries where women are bravely, in my view, removing these coverings and then being arrested for them or worse. As a symbol of oppression, there are other symbols we don't allow in this country. Should we disallow this one? I think that's where
sure.
I am.
I can see where you're coming from in all of that. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, look, let's have a look at the LA Times. We've got in front of us here, of course, the story across the world, actually, and certainly across America, and definitely in LA, is the National Guard being deployed to the streets of LA, and an image right on the front page there with the National Guard. They're fully uniformed up, looking like they're ready for a proper battle. We've just heard from our LA reporter there that 700 Marines are due to arrive. That is a complete switch around. I mean, that would be huge, especially since I've been looking at images all through this evening of LA, and it seems incredibly calm. And it's only a very small area. 700 Marines, John?
You know, you look at what's happening in America for the last few months, I suppose, under Donald Trump, kind of a bit with disbelief. But yeah, I think the key point that the Los Angeles Times is covering, and a point is also being covered in their own newspapers, is, you know, this is all against the state governor's wishes. I think the people who are locally in Los Angeles and California are calling for calm. They're calling on protesters themselves to calm down and keep off the streets, because they believe that it's playing into President Trump's hands, that President Trump can continue using, I think, again, another article on the front page of the Los Angeles Times, something called Title 10, that the reason that he's intervening is to protect those ICE agents, you know, the immigration, customs and enforcement agents who are there as part of, you know, the move that Trump wants to happen to deport immigrants. I mean, I think, I would imagine, given its proximity to the Mexican border, that this is quite a big issue, of course, in all of the cities in California. But yeah, you look at it, as I say, in some disbelief. I think there's that wider point that I think I heard you talking about earlier, that, you know, it isn't the first time that the governor, the Democratic governor, Gavin Newsom's run into trouble with Donald Trump. A few months ago, we had, remember, all the carry-on about the wildfires when Trump was accusing him of, you know,
not
disastrous policies,
yeah,
not switching the water on. Newsom just happens to be somebody who gets quoted as a Democratic hopeful for 2028. So I think there's quite a lot at stake here. And you think this might continue for a few days unless those protesters get off the streets. But what happens after that?
Yeah, I mean, this is the point. If you've got a situation where you're seeing migrants who are taxpayers working in restaurants, working at Home Depot, working on construction sites, whatever they're doing, just minding their own business, trying to do the best that they can, and they're turning up for official meetings in courts to solidify their right to be in the country. They've gone through all the paperwork. It's not cheap. They're going through all the lawyers and doing it the right way, and they're being scooped up and removed. Donald Trump said he was going to remove criminals. These are not criminals. These are people who are trying to get their paperwork in order and are being arrested anyway. And if you don't protest that, then you agree with it. So I understand why those protests, I mean, violence is never the answer, but they weren't violent until, you know, these people were turning up, these ICE agents with their faces covered with guns, with explosives, looking like they're in Fallujah. And it appears trying to rile up these protesters. What choice do these people have?
I think this is a very dangerous situation. It's dangerous in terms of, you know, possibly getting a bit more out of control. I was amazed watching the television pictures last night to see that there were driverless vehicles in a place called Paramount being set on fire. I watched a report on television only half an hour ago which showed an Australian reporter being hit by a rubber bullet in the streets.
By a police officer who turned his gun on her. We could see it very clearly.
Yeah, this is going to be something, as I say, it could escalate quite quickly and very, very dangerously. But that, you know, the latest, of course, as well, is that Newsom is suing Donald Trump, taking him to court, I think, basically because, as I say, the state governor and the state itself were not consulted about any of this.
Yeah, and Gavin Newsom saying we didn't need them. In fact, there were 40 LAPD police officers who were not on duty. They were doing the Pride March because it was under control. They didn't need the National Guard. That's
and
what Newsom said.
accusing Trump of exacerbating the situation.
Of pouring petrol on the situation by sending, people, like I said, who look like they're on the streets of Fallujah, with machine guns and all of that. I mean, it's outrageous. I saw helicopter footage earlier as well of weapons being unloaded as a helicopter landed in downtown, and they were removing boxes of ammunition and weapons from the helicopter. Why? What? Who are they going to turn those weapons against? American people?
Well, again, where does it go next? That's the concern.
It is a massively huge concern. Every day, John, I look what goes on over there and think, what next? What next? Or what are we being distracted from?
It was always going to be like this with Trump. It's a roller coaster. Yeah. I mean, I still maintain that, the reason that he lost to Biden the last time was that kind of people were fed up waking up every morning to these kind of histrionics, worried about what was going to happen next with an unpredictable person. They voted for Biden. They've now got Trump again. And, what is it? He's got another 3.5 years to go. So, there's going to be a roller coaster for a while.
Well, what's interesting, though, is it could be a distraction from the recount that's going on in New York State, of course, which is turning up some very interesting numbers.
Yeah, look, there's a whole series of things happening at the moment. The other thing that's happening in Congress is this whole big, beautiful bill row, where it's clear that there's going to be huge cuts to things like Medicaid and other Social Security items in that budget, all to give some tax cuts. And again, this is, it's a fine distraction, if nothing else, though, I feel a bit uncomfortable calling what's happening in the streets of Los Angeles a distraction.
Yeah, me too, but nothing surprises me anymore. It really doesn't. Let's take a quick break, John. When we come back, we'll start in on the British papers.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here, and with me is John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. Let's start with your sister paper here, The Times. Reeves lays down the law in a spending standoff with Cooper. Rachel Reeves has refused to meet Yvette Cooper's demand for extra police funding, despite the fact we were hearing only a couple of days ago that she was given the extra funding, but now it appears not.
Look, this is the kind of story that you get quite a lot in the run-up to either budgets or spending reviews.
Wednesday, isn't it?
Yeah, Wednesday. What are the priorities going to be? This spending review is particularly important because it sets the priorities for the next 3 years. Lots of it being heavily trailed. That health, for example, is going to get a huge increase. We already know about defence getting an increase. The other story in the papers about the reinstatement of the winter fuel payment is another chunk of money. There's going to be lots and lots of capital capital investment announced, nuclear power, some stuff I think coming, for example, about housing. So there's, this is a big week for the Starmer government, which, has started, frankly, so poorly 11 months ago. I think the last time I was on, I used that expression, a government that was so well prepared for an election, but underprepared for government. So this is a big week now. The story in the Times there, a row between Rachel Reeves and Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, really over the promises that have been made about police numbers in England and Wales. I think the promise that was made was 13,000 extra police officers, and Yvette Cooper warning that really that target will not be reached if she doesn't get more in the spending review than appears to be on offer. But, as I say, there's a lot of horse trading goes on in the run-up to these events, fiscal events. Some people win, some people lose. And at the moment, according to this story, Yvette Cooper's a loser.
Yeah, it is. It is going to be really interesting on Wednesday, because this not only sets out spending for the next 3 years, but it will really tell us the direction that this government is going to go in. It says more than they want it to, frankly. So this will tell us exactly what kind of governance we can expect, and also whether or not it's going to give her the excuse, Reeves, the excuse that she needs to put taxes up in October.
Again, the government promised that it wouldn't raise income tax.
Changing world, John. Changing world.
Sure. And that's been a key pledge. And we'll wait to see. This is the spending plans that are being announced this week. As you rightly say, we'll have to wait to the budget later in the year to see how it's all paid for. Yeah, exactly. I have a sneaking suspicion I know. But anyway, another story here about LA. President Trump has called for the California's governor's arrest as protests spread from Los Angeles to other cities. Trump called Gavin Newsom, the Democrat, a grossly incompetent. You start arresting governors, state governors, for standing up to you? But again, what lines are we overstepping in terms of the American Constitution? It's unthinkable. In terms of the American system, the fact is, that, as we've said already, that he's going in there without the state asking him in. We are now talking about, as you say, arresting the governor. I mean, it's pretty crazy stuff. I mean, he's calling Gavin Newsom grossly incompetent. It's the 5th largest economy in the world. That state alone has a better economy than Britain. Yeah, I mean, look. He's not doing everything wrong, right? Look at what comes out of California every year. Yeah, I think they'll try and go independent. That's what I'd do if I was Newsom. I'd go, right, erect a wall, we're on our own. Anyway, we'll wait and see if Newsom, I don't know who's going to arrest him, his own police officers? I don't know, perhaps. I think that's what the ask is, yeah. Unbelievable. Mind you, I did see Newsom earlier on today saying, go on then, big man, come and arrest me. I'll see. Millions to escape the winter fuel cuts. It's 9 million, I think, are going to get it back. But Rachel Reeves refuses to apologise. Should she apologise? Again, this was a huge mistake that they made right at the very beginning. I mean, I said earlier, I've been spending the last number of weeks a by-election in Hamilton, and, one of the things that was coming up on the doors all the time 10 months after this decision was the winter fuel payment. And we're talking about, for some people, £200 a year, for some people, £300 a year. Now, don't get me wrong, of course, that would be very, very, very welcome to lots of poorer pensioners in this country. But, what can you buy for £6 a week? A couple of loaves and a pint of milk? And to make such a monumental political mistake over such a small amount of money, it seems to me, I mean, it's just amateur politics of the worst sort, Should she apologise? It would, one of the things that I think in politics is much underrated is a thing called humility. Yeah. And if people would apologise for the mistakes they made, they might get on a bit better.
I completely agree with you. What's so hard in saying, look, we made a mistake, right? We had the best intentions, but it was the wrong thing to do. I mean, I don't get why that is so difficult for these people.
Well, it's difficult. Politicians seem to find it difficult, but I think you probably get more kudos for doing that than trying to brazen out. I mean, what's their explanation? Their explanation is that somehow or other the economic numbers are stacking up a bit better for them, that, you know, they came into government, there was a 22 billion black hole, and they were so shocked at this that they announced a package of measures, including the winter fuel payment cut. But now things are already getting better, therefore they've got the money, you know, to actually start paying it again. I'm not sure that people buy that.
No.
I think what's interesting, though, about it is, you know, not every pensioner is going to get the full benefit of this. I think we're talking about, as you said, 9 million now. Before, I think it was more than 11 million pensioners were entitled to it. And again, I don't know that anybody will complain too much that richer pensioners are not in receipt of this. The individuals who will get it are people who are earning less than £35,000 a year, though I think there might be some anomalies that might have to be ironed out round about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Independent also covering that made that story about Rachel Reeves' U-turn. That they're saying that they'll be means tested now, which of course we know is a really blunt instrument actually, and is very expensive in itself. That's why universal benefits are universal benefits in the past, because it was cheaper just to go, you know, right, we'll give it to everybody, and you know, there's only a handful of very rich people who don't need it, so, you know. But they're saying here that pensioners on incomes of £35,000 or less will be eligible, £35,000 a year or less will now be eligible for the payment. And while more than 2 million must opt out. If they're over 35 grand a year, they must opt out or repay it. That sounds really complicated.
I think it's something, you know, given the tax codes and the tax system, they can make work. I mean, I think there are some anomalies, as I say, about widows, for example.
Yeah.
If there's two people in the same household and one is a millionaire and they're not entitled to it, and one is entitled to it because they get 35,000, but also two households, as I say, where if a person dies in a couple, then the couple they'll get it, but if they've got any additional income from their partner passing away, then they might not get it. So there's all sorts of funny wee complications around it that's going to stop some people getting it.
Yeah, it's always the devil is in the detail, isn't it? The Guardian for Tuesday, they're going with Labour pledges £14 billion for nuclear to get UK off fossil fuel roller coaster.
So one of the things we've been talking about is all the revenue spending that the government's spending, all of this stuff that we've just been discussing. But there is a big envelope of capital spending that she's going to allocate this week. I think I've heard a figure of 113 billion. You know, some of that's going to go, a lot of that's going to go to the health service. Some of that's going to go to housing. And I think we're waiting, you know, details about that. But it looks like Ed Miliband's won a chunk of it for a nuclear power station as part of his net zero ambitions, you know, to create some kind of sustainable energy that Sizewell C will be built. And I think, what's the number? Is it 6 billion quid on that? And also this idea spread around the country, though I think some of this is in its infancy, about creating what are called small modular reactors Now, I think these exist in a couple of countries in the world,
Yeah,
but we're going to have a go at it.
Yeah, they were looking at that a while. I think the Tories were even looking at those, because I remember seeing the plans for them, and they can be built relatively quickly.
Yeah, and I think there's a dozen of them or so that can go all around the country.
Yeah, I mean, nuclear power is the cleanest power. I mean, it really is, and these days it's much, much safer, of course.
I think that's true, but you know, some people would argue that it's expensive, and of course some people argue that that ain't quite so safe. Again, I live, what do I live, about 10 miles away from a nuclear power station at Torness, which has served Scotland well. I mean, I think over about the past, 30 years or something.
Yeah.
You know, it's coming to the end of its life. The Scottish Government, although nuclear power and energy matters like this are reserved, because it's got control over planning matters, it's against nuclear power. So no new nuclear plants will be built in Scotland, because under the planning regulations they can stop them.
So what will replace the nuclear power station that is coming towards the end of its life?
Well, look, I mean, by that time, I think we think that in terms of, you know, a renewable capacity, what's left, obviously, in oil and gas in the North Sea, that you know, Scotland, they say, is the Saudi Arabia of renewables. It's just it's taken an awful long time to bring this stuff on stream.
It really is. Right, John, let's take a quick break, and then we will continue with the papers.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, and it's Petrie here with you and with me, John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. John, let's pay attention now, if we can, to the Daily Telegraph, again covering the nuclear story, the winter fuel widow tax story. Boost defence spending or start learning Russian, says NATO chief. The NATO chief wants us all to be at 5% of GDP.
That's the best headline of the day.
I love it.
We've all to start learning Russian.
Yeah.
You know what? One of the things that, again, that's a huge concern for me over the past few months is the number of military experts who seem to be going around telling us that perhaps in 4 or 5 years' time, maybe by 2030, that we're going to be at war with Russia. I mean, I keep reading these sentences which are glibly announced by experts and academics and military people, and I'm not quite sure, you know, I can kind of compute that in my head.
Yeah.
But, you know, we've already increased defence spending, or at least announced that we are gonna. We're going to have a huge programme of spending announced by John Healey, the Defence Minister, and Keir Starmer last week, which is will put some strain on the public finances. You know, we've got this big spending event this week, and that's already built into this, we are told. But it's fantastic, I'm sure, to feel as if we've got greater security, but all of this stuff comes at a huge cost.
Yeah.
And if we've to get this up from 2.5% or where we are at the moment,
Doubling it.
5%,
Yeah.
doubling it will cost an awful lot of money.
An awful lot of money. We've only committed to 3% at the moment with the latest defence review, and a vague sort of promise about 3.5%, let alone 5%. There's a story here that caught my eye, John, right at the bottom, the nib at the bottom. The truth is out there, but the aliens are not. I don't know if you saw this. Let me read it to you. The Pentagon spread lies about UFOs to hide weapons programs at Area 51. Our reporters claim the efforts including planting evidence about alien research and helping to unleash the myth about extraterrestrial activity. A US Air Force colonel visited a bar near a military base in the Nevada desert with pictures of what looked like flying saucers. The photographs were pinned to the walls, and the idea was planted that Area 51 was being used to secretly test alien technology.
Look, I mean, that sounds like the Daily Star rather than the Daily Telegraph, to be honest.
Which is why I liked it, obviously.
Yeah, again, you know, a huge deception. It's claimed perpetrated on the public. It's spawned all these great films like Independence Day and everything. We've seen that whole area, I think Area 51 in the Nevada desert, that, you know, planes, commercial planes are not allowed to fly over and stuff like that. Yeah. Look, I can see this being something that that perhaps, you know, would be perpetrated in the public. On the other hand, I think a lot of people are more than prepared to believe the aliens, and maybe this is a bit of deception in itself.
Who knows? Who knows? This should be a deception, but I have a feeling that it's true. Forget past fines, asks Thames Water lenders. Now, these are the people who want to buy into Thames Water, but they want us to forgive all the fines. I mean, these people have got a gall.
I have a problem with this story in that I think whatever happens, it's got the government over a barrel. The government doesn't want to bring it back into public ownership because it would cost an awful lot of money to do that. They are hoping somebody steps in, a group of investors, and in this case the lenders seem to have basically got together and are putting in a bid, but they've got all sorts of conditions that in order to take over the company that they've set out. I think in hindsight, looking back at all of this, it was a huge mistake that the government made in terms of privatising water. I mean, again, I can only look to where I live. In Scotland, our water's in public ownership. Company Scottish Water runs the water system, and we frankly don't have the bills you have in England, though it rains a lot more. But we don't have any of this trouble, and this is going to cost, again, a lot of money for the public purse, whatever happens.
I mean, look, you know, these companies have proved that model doesn't work. That all they do when they privatise, when they buy into these companies, is they increase debt and pay themselves with debt. So it's really cheap of them, or rich of them, to say, look, forgive those fines and we'll give you 17 billion. It's hundreds of millions of pounds worth of fines, which frankly have been pushed back on to the millions of Thames Water customers. My bills have got, when I got my bill, I thought, oh, that's the year. No, that was for 6 months. And now they're talking about lumping us with an extra 20 to 30% on top, because these companies who privately invest, they do not fix anything. They borrow money to pay their dividends out. It is a Ponzi scheme. It is absolutely disgraceful. So the government should not even be considering allowing somebody else to get in there and literally just shovel the brown stuff at us and not fix anything and charge us more for it. It's disgusting.
Again, the only other thing I can say about this is in the past about, we're supposed to have regulators who look at these things,
rubbish
who oversee these companies, and you have to ask the question, what happened on that front over the past, what is it, is it 30 years since these companies were privatised?
I mean, they were privatised with no debt, with nothing. They were just a clean slate, and all they've done is pile debt upon debt upon debt. That is the money-making method. They just put in more debt, take out more money, get more debt, take out more money, and these people are saying, well, they want a regulatory reset.
Yeah, and also that nobody gets prosecuted for any of this, and a load of other demands besides.
And they should be prosecuted. In fact, they should be jailed. You shouldn't be allowed to borrow money to pay dividends. That should be illegal. I don't know why it isn't. Let's take a quick break, John, and we will be... have I done all my breaks? This is the last one. We won't. I got lost. I got confused. Winter fuel U-turn gets warm welcome, but Labour MPs warn Reeves don't make the same mistake on disability benefits.
Yeah, look, some of the decisions that have to be taken this week, will live with the government for a while. One of them is cuts in disability benefits and cuts in welfare, which only a few weeks ago we were told would help get people back to work, you may recall.
Yeah.
In addition to that, the government needs to decide what it's doing about the two-child benefit cap, which is another issue.
A very expensive issue to
I think both of these things are pretty expensive. So, the Labour backbenchers, of whom many of them have been mumping, behind the scenes, a smaller number have actually been out there publicly making statements about the welfare and disability cuts. They could cause, particularly after the U-turn this week, the government a lot of bother in the coming months if they don't do anything about these issues.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how she's meant to spread the money that thinly. I mean, there's an extra 30 billion to NHS. I mean, they got to. I thought they were going to fix the NHS so it didn't need this extra money and get it working properly. Just throwing more and more money at it, which, was it 60% of the NHS spending is on salaries anyway, 60, 70%?
The difficulty with the NHS is that, the government can throw lots and lots of money at the NHS.
It'll never be enough.
It'll never be enough because the population's getting older. The older you get, the more complex your problems get, the more times you use the service, whether that's the GP service, whether that's the accident and emergency, whether that's people who are stuck in hospitals and can't get out because there's no social care. The demand is more than the amount of money that the government can put into the service. And that's the issue that I think we have. I think, look, to be fair, they've already had some limited success in reducing waiting times and waiting lists, certainly south of the border, but there's a long, long way to go. I mean, the latest thing you appear to be facing in England anyway is trouble over possible strikes with doctors and nurses again. And if you're trying to, get the health service to recover, if you're trying to bring all these numbers down, that's the last thing you need.
Yeah, well, they said they would. Doctors even last time said when they got their pay rise, they went, yeah, we're still coming back. We wanted 30%. The Daily Mail, again, looks at the winter fuel humiliation. And as you said, they've gone with the line that Starmer is ridiculed for suggesting the move is now possible because Labour fixed our stricken economy, which no one is going to believe.
Yeah, and again, the Daily Mail, as it would, raising all sorts of questions about the capabilities of the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. They're deluded, they refuse to apologise, coming up with that excuses I said earlier, you know, to explain it all away. So I think, you know, this will be quite an interesting few months to see, you know, if Starmer continues to back the Chancellor.
Yeah. Again, the Metro humiliating, which I thought was quite a good headline. That's quite clever.
Yep.
So again, Rachel Reeves being humiliated by a U-turn. I mean, that is the headline. Those are the headlines that Rachel Reeves did not want. This whole idea of a U-turn, which is why she's not apologising, because she's trying to maintain that it's because everything's so much better that she can now afford to go back on it. But it's not a U-turn.
I think, look, for me, I think there's just been an inevitability that this had to happen.
Had to.
It just, you know, it's been such a colossal error on their part. It won't go away. It is the thing that has defined the issue that's defined the first 10 months of the government. You know, you'll remember the circumstances. I think we may have spoken about this at the time. It was all round about the same time that we found out that the Prime Minister was getting his suits and his specs paid for.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, you know, 20,000 quid. From a Labour Lord,
Lord Ali,
to you know, a very comfortably off Prime Minister, and then the Chancellor comes out, you know, less than 30 days after they get elected with a massive majority and cuts this money from pensioners. I mean, all of it, everything around it was just wrong.
Yeah. I mean, literally, we were banging our heads going, why would you do it? It was such a political decision straight out the gate, when they could have done it, if they were going to do it, in the first budget. But who knows why they did it? To show strength? I don't know. Right, it is time for a break now, so let's take that. Back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, this is Talk, and it's Petrie here, and with me is John Boothman, and we're going through the papers for Tuesday. I'm going to buzz through the next couple of papers quite quickly, John, because they repeat what we've talked about already. Daily Express, victory for pensioners. The Mirror, winter wonderful, 7.5 million to get fuel payment again. That's the Mirror. The Sun, it was fuelish, so say sorry. Quite a nice headline. and that says relief for 9 million OAPs. And the Financial Times, London Tech Week starts as the US bidders swoop in on 3 more British targets. So London Tech Week, and this is the week as well that we find out that AI lies. It knows how to lie.
Yeah, look, there was an absolutely tremendous package on Sky Television last week with Sam Coates, their political correspondent, where he basically had made a programme and asked AI to write a script for the programme. And before the programme was broadcast, it published a transcript of the programme, which it had just in effect made up from previous statements that he's made. And when he looked at it, he said, this isn't the programme. And how could it do it before the programme was broadcast? In effect, AI was lying.
I mean, when it starts going, oh, forget the programme, I'll do it anyway, that's when I start to worry. So that's the FT. A couple of stories of yours. Can Reform UK win over voters in Wales? This is about Port Talbot.
Well, look, we had all this in Scotland in the past few weeks at the by-election that I've been working on. The success of Reform, although they came third, they got 26% of the vote. And if you look at the opinion polls in Wales, what's happening in Wales, again with the Welsh Senedd being re-elected next year in their elections next May, Labour, Plaid Cymru and Reform are all now running neck and neck. Nigel Farage has been in Wales, making a big speech, I think, last night, talking about reinvigorating the old industries of Wales, the coal mines, the steel plants, and saying that this is the answer to employment in Wales. So he genuinely thinks, and the polls, you know, are pointing in this direction, that Reform UK could be the government in Wales next year.
Wow. I mean, you know, opening old pits up. I mean, I saw Richard Tice talking about that as well.
Well, you know, look, it seems like, again, an interesting idea, and it's certainly the case that there is some coal around in various parts of the country, but I think it sounds a bit fanciful to me, to be honest. However, you know, I'm sure it is the case that there is coal under the ground in some places in the country, and if the Reform think they can open them up, that will be something that people will be prepared to look at.
Would the Welsh be aching to get back to that form of employment?
Well, again, you know, I suppose reopening old mines, you know, might not be the way forward. You know, remember, it's not long since, and again, where I live, it's not long since there were great big open cast pits around the country. You know, they scarred the countryside, it has to be said. But, you know, it was something that was a big, big industry in the last decade, even here.
Yeah. The other story, I love this. Google battling a fox infestation.
I thought this was a brilliant story in The Guardian, that Google are building a headquarters somewhere near King's Cross. And on the roof, they've got a 300-metre garden area. And there's foxes being spotted on the roof of the garden area. I just thought it was a really, really good story.
Foxes have begun to dig burrows in soil on a rooftop garden. I mean, how deep is the soil on a rooftop garden?
Well, I think pretty deep. If you read on in the story, I mean, they're talking about having, you know, trees and quite extensive plantation on the roof. So it's just an interesting story. I mean, foxes are everywhere, I think, now in cities, partly because people, you know, there's food being discarded from restaurants, there's food people discard in their bins. Last week, this is going to sound a bit odd, my son was wakened up in the middle of the night and he taped a noise outside. He wondered what it was.
Oh, foxes,
we
they're
think
awful.
It was two foxes crying outside the house.
It sounds like children or women being attacked. It is terrifying. It's a horrible sound. I mean, my garden is inundated with foxes and squirrels. Squirrels are the biggest nuisance in my garden. But I'm just, how on earth did foxes get up to the roof? of the Google building. I mean, in the lift?
Who knows? That's why the story is so fascinating.
On the roof. I mean, are they flying now? I don't know. This has got to be. Look, this is a big story, John. We need to know how the foxes got up there in the first place. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I tell you what else is interesting to me. I don't know if you're a religious fellow, but the Daily Star has the front page of this is they've obviously got two editors now, one who's away sometimes and the other one who's very serious. This one is the one I prefer. For folk's sake, it says wizards, goblins and monsters are replacing religion.
Yeah, look, organised religion as we know it, church attendances are down, fewer and fewer people are practising religion, and I think people are turning to alternatives, and the alternatives that are being talked about on the front page of the Daily Star are, you know, folklore, wizards, witches, and the like. I mean, funnily enough, I did a story about the Scottish Parliament, I think, was it last year or the year before, where they have a thing at the beginning of the session every week where a religious figure or a figure from civic society gives a 5-minute period of reflection, a bit like, you know, a bit like Thought for the Day.
Oh, Thought for the Day, yeah. Well, it used to be just Vickers, didn't it? But it's not anymore.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, they had the first pagan who came along to the Scottish Parliament and gave their time for reflection. It was described at the time, I think, as a historic day for druids and witches. But, you know, it takes all sorts.
I mean, look, I'm not going to be popular saying this, but I will say it. It has as much validation for me as any other religion. I mean, you know, how can anybody prove? You can't prove that it's not the real one, as nobody else can prove that their religion is the real one. Yeah, well, for me, you know, why not? If it makes you happy and it provides you with a sense of something, then it's as valid as believing in a man in the sky.
Well, each to their own.
Yeah, exactly. Each to their own. I might have a look at it as a potential. The other couple of stories that I just wanted to mention with you, John, is Frederick Forsyth. He has now died, and there's a lot of people talking about this author. A lot of the papers covering him on the inside pages.
Author, journalist, spy. RAF pilot, I think he was as well. Look, I mean, the Day of the Jackal, what a book. Look at all of the spin-offs that there's been from that. I don't know if you've watched recently the Eddie Redmayne Jackal.
Yes.
Absolutely fabulous.
Brilliant.
And the other book that I think I can remember was the Odessa File.
That's it, yeah.
Those
are the only two I can remember as well.
Yeah. Right-wing group around, I think, not just in one country, around the world, to try and bring back, you know, the far right from the Second World War. I mean, incredible imagination, incredible author, and clearly, you know, a lot of what he had written was based on his own experience.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But actually, and also looking at the Odessa files, it's, you know, you could say that he was looking to the future. But also, I was reading today that George Orwell, 1984, was given a warning at the time for being sexist.
Again, you know, when you read some novels and you apply today's mores and today's cultural values to the novels, it grates sometime. I mean, the cultural mores of what when Orwell wrote that book are very, very different from what they are now. Yeah. And I think that's the same, you know, for a whole series of novels and books. My concern is that, you know, as we move forward, that you know, these books that are written should be considered as being products of their time
and be left
rather
alone.
than people trying to ban them or correct them and whatever, which is, I think, the kind of thing that we see nowadays.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm with you. They should be
books should be looked at in the original.
Yeah.
And we should realise, and we should actually exercise a bit of understanding that they were written according to the mores of the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And anybody who hasn't read 1984 recently, I would suggest you do. It's a very good book. Another story that I just wanted to mention to you just before I go, just at the end of the programme, is how to survive a long summer of back-to-back weddings. Have you got lots of weddings to go to in the summertime? I mean, I avoid them like the plague if I can.
I hope not. Unless my children are telling me something that I don't know.
Do you like a wedding?
Yeah, I think... I was reading something at the weekend, or watched something on telly, I think, at the weekend about the different fashions for weddings. And somebody was talking about how there is now a fashion for having evening weddings, which are obviously less expensive than the whole day affairs. I think the thing that kind of grates with a lot of people about weddings is, you know, they sort of like start off at lunchtime.
Oh, they're all day.
Kind of
they're really boring.
Going,
the food is horrible. The people are usually dull. Not for me. So don't invite me to a wedding, ever. John, it's great to see you. Thank you so much. John Boothman there. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up, we're going to be heading back to LA.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, and a very good morning to you. It is Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock, and we will be turning to the phone in a few minutes' time. But there has been some development. We heard first of all from Caroline Faraday when I was talking to her earlier that 700 Marines are to be deployed to LA. 700. American soldiers deployed to the streets of LA. So we've been checking through on this, and indeed it is true. The Pentagon has now confirmed it is deploying 700 Marines to Los Angeles to deal with protests over immigration raids in order to protect federal property and facilities. I am looking at live pictures at the moment of LA, and it's peaceful. It is peaceful. In fact, if you're watching on YouTube, you will be able to see these are live images here. There is no sign of any fighting, any problems or any issues. I mean, it could be that it might get a little bit worse, I suppose, during the evening, but at the moment those protests are absolutely the protesters are just standing around on the street, which is their First Amendment right to do. In the Constitution they are allowed to do that, but we're now hearing that that the Pentagon is activating 700 Marines in the Los Angeles area. Donald Trump has defended his decision to deploy the National Guard, while the California governor Gavin Newsom sues the administration over the move. Trump has just been saying that that downtown LA would have been obliterated had he not sent in those guards. Well, I have to tell you again, following the timeline of this, and I was extensively following this, the bits of trouble that there were happened before really as he. They happened after he said that he was going to send the guard. Right, so that's the way round it was. There was no trouble. He said he was going to send the guard. Whether that is connected to it in any way, I don't know, but then there was that trouble that we've all seen. As Caroline Faraday was saying, who lives in LA, so this is a very small area of downtown LA, and that it is really calm at the moment. It just doesn't seem to be any issue whatsoever, certainly not deserving, I would say, of 700 Marines. Some of the toughest soldiers that the US military has, 700 of them deploying to downtown Los Angeles. NBC has said it's a temporary measure until more troops from the National Guard arrive. 300 California National Guard troops have already been deployed, and the governor, Newsom, said that Trump's activation of these Marines is a deranged fantasy. Well, joining me now to discuss this is Executive Director at the National Security Institute at George Mason University in Washington, D.C., Jamil Jaffer. Jamil, good evening to you. Is this an escalation? What is happening? Why are these 700 Marines going to LA?
Well, I think part of the reason here is that the president thinks that Los Angeles, that the state, the city needs more support, that they're not able to currently control the situation. So he's deploying the forces he has. Now, I think in an ideal world, the president, if he was going to deploy more forces, would deploy the National Guard. But they're not prepared right now. And so he's made the decision to add 700 Marines to Task Force 51, which is the group of military folks that are there deployed to the streets of LA, alongside, I would mention, not just the LAPD, but a large swath of federal agents and law enforcement from CBP, ICE, and the like. And so it's not just sort of classic LAPD law enforcement on the ground, but you've got now a variety of federal officers, including now, soon to be at least 700 Marines, including the National Guard.
I mean, I'm looking at images of LA now. There is absolutely no sign of trouble. The governor, Gavin Newsom, said that this is a deranged fantasy, that they are not required. In fact, he didn't okay the arrival of those 300 National Guard in the first place. LA was having Pride at the same time. 40 police officers were at Pride, and Gavin Newsom said, look, if we needed them, we would have pulled them to the protest, but we didn't need them. This is antagonistic.
Right. That's been made clear, I think, both by Governor Newsom as well as LA Mayor Karen Bass. Now, that being said, We obviously saw what happened on the streets of LA over the weekend. You saw a number of cars on fire, these Waymo cars that these protesters had stopped and had vandalized. So there's clearly something more going on than meets the eye, in the sense that if LAPD really had the situation under control, either alone or with the federal officers that were there, you might not have seen those things take place. And those things did take place. The president then, in what I think everyone agrees was an unprecedented move to deploy the National Guard without the request of a governor. The only time that's happened before, as I know you know, Petrie, was in the scenario where on multiple occasions, American presidents have deployed the National Guard without state authority to enforce civil rights laws. To enforce desegregation orders by courts. And that's not what happened here.
No.
This is the first time that we know of that in a riot type scenario or a law and order type scenario where a governor hasn't requested support and the president's deployed the troops. Anyways, the president has the authority, to be clear. There's no question the president has the authority to do this, to federalize the National Guard and deploy them. But the circumstances
only under certain laws, right? And Gavin Newsom is saying that Title 10, which is the one that Donald Trump cited, is not relevant here, and that's why he's taking him to court for it. And the only time that Donald Trump really had the right to use the National Guard is during an insurrection, and there was one in Washington where he could have deployed the National Guard. It's the only area that he can do it without state governor approval, and he didn't do that.
No, that's exactly right. And that being said, though, the president has made a determination, right, pursuant to statute. He has statutory authority to take action in a scenario where he determines there's an insurrection. Now, that can be litigated down the road. But he hasn't used the
word insurrection on LA. He hasn't cited insurrection.
Right. Well, one of his advisors referred to it as insurrection, Stephen Miller. Did refer to it that way. Now, we'll see what authority the president cites if and when he goes to court, right? But what we know now, as of now, at least, is the president has determined, under whatever authority he thinks he has, that he has the authority to do so. And now it'll be a question it'll be litigated, and we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, you know, it's sort of the real question of whether the president had the authority or not. It's happened. And so the question now becomes, what if anything, needs to be done about this, and what are the results? And as you see on the ground there in LA, there may not be immediate activities going on, but at least the president's view is, and again, rightly or wrongly, he could be wrong about it, but his view is that even the deployment of the National Guard did not get the situation under sufficient control, and as a result, he's now decided to deploy these 700 Marines.
But he decided to send the National Guard before there was any trouble on the streets, before there was any violence.
Right. No, I think that's right. I mean, look, I think the president obviously made the determination that he anticipated there might be violence, and it turns out he was right. I mean, look, what we saw happen in LA.
Did that not antagonise the situation? This is what Newsom is saying. Look, you've got people in LA who are exercising their First Amendment rights. Rioting is wrong. Everybody can agree with that. But it was very peaceful. It was peaceful, and people were angry, and they were shouting at ICE, and they had ICE pinned down at one point. But they certainly weren't doing anything else up until that point. And what else are these people meant to do when they're seeing their neighbourhoods being torn apart and these immigrants being removed? Not criminals, mind you, and Trump is still saying they're all criminals. These were hard-working immigrants. People have the right under the First Amendment to do that.
Well, let's talk about a few things there, Petrie. I think there's a lot to say there. Number one, whether the protests were peaceful or not at the time, right? The idea that simply because the president or anybody, if the governor decided to do it, decides to deploy armed, police officers or riot police or the military, the National Guard, or the like, that doesn't justify, as you know, the decision to engage in the kind of behavior that we saw in Los Angeles.
There's no,
but this argument that I think has been said a lot in the last couple of days that, the president provoked the situation and caused the violence that took place. There's no basis for saying that, right? Other than the president made a determination and then people engaged in violence, right? The violence is not a justifiable response to the National Guard being deployed. Just like it wouldn't be an appropriate response to the police being deployed or police in riot gear being deployed. And so I think that's sort of precept number one. Precept number two, I think it's fair to say that the president is accurate. Look, I don't agree with the president on a lot of things, right? The president accurately is saying that the people that have been removed by ICE are violating federal law because they're present in the United States unlawfully. Does that justify grabbing them off the streets and throwing them in cells and treating them inappropriately? Of course not. But are they a violation of federal law? Absolutely. Are they criminals? Yes. Are they violent criminals? Have they engaged in other crimes beyond being illegally present? Some of them may have. We don't know for sure.
Hang on, Jamil. You say, are they criminals? Yes. And many of these people are trying to get their paperwork in order, and they're being arrested at court. Is that a criminal who's trying to do the right thing, trying to get their paperwork sorted out, going through the process, and they're being arrested in the courthouse? I don't see the link between that being a criminal.
Well, Petrie, it's very simple. It's very straightforward, right? It is not lawful, and it is a crime to be present in a country, whether it's the United States or France or the UK. It is a crime to be present in a country without lawful papers. Now,
but they're trying to get
your papers in order.
Yeah, they're trying to get those lawful papers.
That's not how it works. But that's not how the process works.
But isn't that how asylum works? Isn't that how everybody going to any country?
That is not. No, absolutely not. If I enter the UK, right? If I wasn't a U.S. citizen, I can come there without a visa because I'm a U.S. citizen. But if I want to enter the UK and I want to remain in the UK, I have to apply before I arrive for an immigrant visa. If I'm granted one, then I can enter. I am not allowed to simply cross the border into the UK, into France, into the EU, into the United States without lawful papers. If I choose to do that, then at the border, I can choose to claim asylum and say to a border officer, I am seeking asylum in the United States, and then they will process me and either grant me temporary asylee status, at which point I'm lawfully in the country on a temporary basis, and then I can litigate it, right? But if the border officer doesn't grant me asylee status, or I sneak in, and then I want to claim asylum in court, I am not present lawfully. That is true in the UK. That is true in the EU. That is true in the United States. That is true in every country in the world. There's no country where you can enter that country unlawfully and you're present there and it's not a crime. Now, some countries may enforce it. Some countries may not. A lot of these people, you're right, are coming to the United States to work in jobs that other people may not want, jobs that other people may not be willing to accept the wage for. We know for a fact in the United States that illegal immigrants and legal immigrants are critical to our national economy, right? That being said, it doesn't change the fact that when you enter the country without lawful papers, you are committing a federal crime, and you are both prosecutable and you are removable immediately. Now, there's a process by which the government lets you go through, which is to say, I am here lawfully, I deserve asylum, I can't be removed immediately.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's a lot of things, and these people are. I'm not saying that these people are criminals in any sense of the word, other than having committed the crime of being present unlawfully. The president, of course, is making allusions that suggest something more. But at a minimum, it is not inappropriate or illegal for the United States to take somebody who's present unlawfully in the country, detain them, and seek to remove them. That is a normal process that every country in the world has the authority to do.
With due process.
How they handle it, and that due process is, when you're picked up, you have a chance to argue to a judge that you are not present here lawfully. As a general matter in immigration proceedings, that's an executive branch official.
But that hasn't been happening, has it? Due process hasn't been followed.
We have certainly seen problems with that. We've seen these removal of a number of what the president says are violent gang members without due process. That's gone all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, and the Supreme Court has said no. You must give these people the right to challenge their detention in court, because just because you say so, it doesn't mean they are here illegally. Exactly. It doesn't mean they qualify to the orders. But everyone agrees that if a court determines that they are what you say they are, then they are removable. And so the president has to allow the process to take place. And we've seen problems with that. And we've seen the court all the way to the Supreme Court, 9-0 decision, take that back. But what you see in LA right now, in terms of what ICE is doing, it's obviously very concerning. The governor of California, the mayor of LA is very concerned. They're concerned about the communities there. And the way they're handling themselves may not be something that we would like to see, or that you might not like, I might not like. Is it unlawful? That's a different question.
It's in a sanctuary city, right, isn't it? Just before I let you go, Steve Bannon is calling for the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, to be arrested for interfering with federal authorities. And front page of one of our newspapers today saying that Trump wants Newsom arrested.
Yeah. Well, we heard Tom Homan, the border czar, yesterday say that if Gavin Newsom gets in the way, he said that he wouldn't hesitate to arrest him. Well, we saw Gavin Newsom on TV yesterday say pretty straightforwardly, bring it. And he said to Tom Homan, you should come on down and arrest me. So that issue is now teed up. We'll see if, in fact, the president or his team decides to arrest either the mayor or the governor. It would be unprecedented, I think, for a public official in the course of their duties to be arrested. But at the same time, it is when federal law is being violated, those who obstruct the execution of federal law can be arrested. It is a federal crime. And while we may not agree with it, you or I or anybody else on a policy level may not agree, think to yourself that this were a Southern governor in the 1950s during the Civil Rights Movement, and they stood in the doorway of a classroom that the Supreme Court ordered desegregated, in violation of federal law, could a president have ordered that person arrested? The answer is probably yes. Did they? They didn't. They simply escorted the students into those schools. Could they have? They probably could have. And could they do it here? They probably could. It will tee up a huge political fight, Petrie, and we'll see what happens after that. I think it's a fight probably that neither really wants, but both appear to be trying to pick it right now, and so we'll see how that plays out.
And finally, on those 700 Marines, has their level of force been agreed yet?
The question of when lethal force is used is a question set by the commander-in-chief and then the officials on the ground, the rules of engagement. Obviously, the president may have a different view of what the appropriate level of use of force is than others may. And certainly the levels of use of force may be different than what traditional law enforcement is used to. That's part of why you call out the National Guard and or the Marines. But this is a very dangerous and tense situation. The president will be wise to be very cautious here. I don't think anybody, not the president, not the governor, not the mayor, and certainly not the people of Los Angeles, wants to see American troops firing on anybody, any protesters, Americans or otherwise, or people here legally or illegally. That is not something that's going to do our nation a favor. It's not something that's going to do the president any favors.
But they could use, the Marines could be used to shoot on American citizens on American soil.
Well, look, I mean, it would obviously be hugely problematic and could violate all sorts of laws. You can't use the military in the United States to effectuate civilian law. There's a law against that. It's called the Posse Comitatus Act. That doesn't prevent the government from deploying the military to support otherwise lawful law enforcement efforts. It simply prohibits them from being used purely for law enforcement purposes. There's a fine line between those things. And the idea of the U.S. military firing on Americans is obviously anathema. We've seen it happen on occasion at Kent State. We've seen it at times during riot scenarios but they always try to use non-lethal force first, right? And that's the way it ought to be. That's the way law enforcement operates. That's the way the military ought to operate in these circumstances. The president, his borders are, anybody else that's influential in this process, Stephen Miller, should be very cautious. They should make sure they set the lines of responsibility, the lines of authority, and the rules of engagement very clearly, and should err in favor of not using lethal force, except if there's a circumstance in which that would be interpreted, just like it would, by the way, for a law enforcement officer to use lethal force. Our law enforcement officers, our police...
It's very different to have the military shooting at civilians.
It is exactly. It's exactly right. Yeah. It's bad enough. You're exactly right.
That's a big move.
It's a big move, and it would be very dangerous, and I think actually destructive to the president's position. And I don't think it would gain him support. I think it would cause problems. I think he's probably aware of that. Whether he
That's
chooses
a terrifying statement, Jamil. He's probably aware of that.
Well, look, I think by all accounts, the current president chooses to do things differently than a lot of his predecessors in many, many ways, not just in this scenario, and those things are controversial and problematic at times. And so we'll see how he decides to handle the situation. But of course, the American people will judge him. The American political system will judge him. And the media is watching every minute of this, not just the American media, but the global media. And so we'll see how this plays out. But everyone will be wise in this scenario to tone things down, to be cautious. And I will say this, what we saw on the streets of Los Angeles over the last few days, it's my hometown, it's unacceptable. People, whatever protests you may have, whether you're concerned about what's happening on the streets or not, you cannot attack cars, destroy them, light them on fire. We've seen this in city after city after city across the country when people get heated. Police reacted also, not always appropriate, right? But what we don't want here is the kind of violence that we've seen in LA over the last few days. on both sides of the aisle. But to be clear, when you're engaged in a peaceful protest, stopping cars, vandalizing them, and burning them is not acceptable.
I know, I couldn't agree with that more. I really couldn't. I just hope that these Marines remember the Constitution. Thank you very much indeed, Jamil. Jamil Jafar there, talking to us live from the US, Executive Director at the National Security Institute at the George Mason University in Washington, D.C. Quick break, then back to the phone in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is...
Hi there, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you. In a few minutes' time, we're going to start with the phone in, and I want to talk to you about the burqa. And there's been a lot of talk recently about this as to whether it should be banned or not in this country. It was raised in the House of Commons last week, saying, are we going to follow France and Denmark and other countries by banning the burqa completely? So I want to know whether you think we should ban it, or whether you think that it should be a matter of choice, if it is indeed genuine choice. I happen to think that it can't be, but I could be wrong. So if I am wrong, please do give me a call, 0344 499 1000, or give me a call anyway and tell me what you think about it being worn by other people. So yeah, that is coming up in a few minutes' time. Just got a message from Gary. I was talking to John Boothman a little while ago about foxes being found on top of the Google building in London, and I was wondering how on earth they got up there. I mean, how do you even get up to the top of a building? And Gary's just sent me a story that says a fox was found living on the top of the Shard in London. How? I mean, was a woman wearing him around her neck as a sort of fox? You know, the women used to wear them, didn't they? Those dead foxes around their necks. Perhaps it was faking and then got up and ran away. How is it possible? I don't know. I don't know how these things... Anyway, listen, we're giving you the chance to win FIFA Club World Cup final tickets thanks to our friends at DAZN. Here is everything you need to know.
Hello. Look who it is, it's me, Andy Goldstein. And here at talkSPORT, we're gearing up for the Club World Cup in the United States. And to celebrate, we've got 2 tickets to the final in New York on July the 13th to give away. We're going to sort out the flights, we're going to sort out the accommodation, and we're going to give you £5 grand spending money to spend however you want. How about that?
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, all you have to do to enter is text the word football to 83338. Do that by the 13th of June at 11 p.m. and that's it, you're done. You're in the draw. A text will cost £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have bill payer's permission. Or you can just send your name and number by post to Club World Cup Final Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, and it must arrive by 5 p.m. on the 18th of June.
This is a TalkSport limited competition run on TalkSport Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Yeah, don't miss out on this incredible giveaway, thanks to our friends at DAZN, and good luck to you. Latoya has sent me a message saying, how's the puppy? I took him out on the lead for the first time today. He was so scared. He was scared of the cars and the traffic, even though I've carried him in the pouch with me to try and get him used to all the noises and everything. But he couldn't cope with it, bless him. So I had to carry him. And then I made him walk on the way back, and he got a little bit better. I took him down some quieter side roads and he got a little bit better. But it was really sad to see his little face. He was really scared. And Latoya's also said, hi Petrie, great show. Still not over your gold smuggler last week and your reaction. That was the best call, wasn't it? Wasn't that wonderful? I think we need a good news segment. The UK is barely giving us sun. I know. What's happened? What's happened? Quick break, but then when I'm back, we will settle into the phone-in.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there. This is Talk, and it's Petrie here until 1 o'clock. And I wanted to talk to you about the burqa. The Home Secretary has said she holds meetings with constituents who wear the burqa after Kemi Badenoch said she refuses to do so. Chris Phillips said the Tories would give serious thought to rules on coverings after the party leader said employers ought to be free to ban their staff from wearing burqas. And I do think there are places where burqas should be banned, and I think that teachers shouldn't be allowed to wear them because children need to see face and facial expressions and hear you clearly. I think that hospitals and places like that, they shouldn't be allowed either for hygiene reasons, etc., etc. I don't think they are, actually. I'm not convinced they are. Anyway, I do think there are places that they should be banned, and that if you're wearing a burqa and you're required to show your face, then you should show your face. I do understand that wearing a burqa is about modesty and about covering your face, but as I said earlier, I did wear one for a few hours. I was meant to go out all day in one. I couldn't do it. I was literally, by the end of it, I was in tears. I thought I was going to have a breakdown. I couldn't breathe properly. I couldn't see properly. I had to look down all the time. You can't make eye contact with anyone because I had to look down because you can't see. If you imagine covering your face, you can't see where the steps are unless you look down. You can't see where you're walking. I found it really isolating. I thought that it was unpleasant. It was hot. It was, you feel shut off from the world. Nobody wants to look at you. Nobody wants to make eye contact with you. You can't make eye contact with them. I just found it all incredibly difficult. I can't imagine that wearing one is ever a genuine choice. I can't. But then I don't come from that background. I don't have that cultural association with it. My only association with it is that it is used as a way to shut women away. It is a symbol of oppression. It is a symbol of I think, violence towards women. I think it's a symbol of subjugating women. You look at Afghanistan and what they do to women there. I see it. It is definitely not, for me, a symbol of freedom. It is not. It is the opposite to me. So I'm just giving you my view. If it is a genuine choice, and in some women I believe it is actually a choice, I can't understand that choice. I don't get it. But if it is a genuine choice, should we accept that that is the way some women choose to live their lives? That they choose that, in my words, in my experience, that imprisonment, if they choose it. I mean, people choose to smoke and that's bad for them, right? If people choose to wear a full face covering and a full body covering, my only concern is it really choice? Or is it forced choice based on their own societal beliefs on women? You know, I don't know. I don't know, you'd have to tell me. Grace is in London on this. Hello, Grace.
Hi.
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 What do you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd say that I have suspicions that some of the people who are very opposed to Muslim dress are motivated by just generally disliking Islam. Certainly not all people who are opposed to Muslim dress, but I think some of them may be, in part because there are lots of women and girls around our world who are being really, really oppressed. I mean, particularly in Afghanistan, obviously, but there are also women and girls in other parts of our world who are forced into marriage at very, very young ages. There are girls who are suffering FGM. There are obviously just girls who aren't able to go to school at all because they're girls, or have to spend hours walking for water each day. And the people who are complaining about the burqa from certain parts of the political spectrum aren't advocating for more support for those women and girls. In fact, they're advocating for foreign aid, which has done a lot to help some of those women and girls, to be withdrawn. So that makes me think that people aren't necessarily all about supporting females when they say, let's oppose the burqa. Some people certainly are, and I do think that there are real concerns to be had about women being pressured to wear the burqa. But I think that some of the people bringing forward this argument, such as certain politicians or talking heads, that they aren't all necessarily motivated by women's liberation.
I couldn't agree more.
But
I totally agree with you.
But yeah, I'd love to I'd love to talk to some Muslim women who do wear burqas about what's led them to that. I think the answer to the question about whether or not it should be allowed probably depends really on some serious research, because somehow we need to work out whether the majority of women who wear it have been pressured into it, or whether the majority have really chosen it of their own volition. And I'm finding it hard to think that the latter would be the case. particularly if they've been brought up in quite a closed-off community and they've been led to think from a young age they ought to do that. I mean, I was.
You see, that's what I mean about genuine choice, because you can be groomed into believing something, right? So if you're brought up in a very culturally traditional, there's nothing in the Quran, by the way, that says women have to be covered. It just suggests that they might want to cover their hair for modesty's sake, but the rest of it is purely a cultural, device by men, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was brought up in a Christian family, but I didn't really believe it. And then when I was a little bit older, I in studying science, I came to conclude actually, it does make sense to think that there's a God. And then studying further, I came to conclude that I believe in the accounts of the resurrection of Jesus, although I know that sounds completely mad to people and I don't know how to explain it all, but I therefore chose to follow Jesus because I'd come to conclude for myself that I thought it was true, and I just worry that some people might feel under pressure to go along with things that they haven't really made the decision about for themselves. That sounds very patronising. I'm sure that there are some women who wear Muslim attire who have given it a lot of thought, but I'd love to ask them what their reasoning is, because I could talk to people about what my reasoning is for my beliefs, and I wonder where their reasoning is, or whether they have been put under pressure. So I really worry about women being put under pressure, and I worry about the wider message that it sends, because I think if you're suggesting to men that a woman's face is inherently a sexual thing that might cause them to feel aroused, what message is that sending to men and boys?
I can't argue with you on that. And it's really interesting because a lot of women, I have spoken to a lot of women who wear burqas, and they will say to me, look, it's about modesty. I choose it because I don't want men to look at me. I think they've been convinced that all men are potential rapists. That's why they, in a lot of cases, will only associate with men in their family, or they, certainly in other countries, they can only go out with a man from their family because they see every man as a predator. It's really interesting to me, if you look at rape statistics in countries where the burqa is worn, it doesn't protect women from rape and sexual abuse.
Of course, no.
It doesn't, because it really doesn't. So women who wear burqas are as likely, if not more likely, to be sexually abused because of, maybe cultural attitudes towards women in those countries as being lesser than they are in this country. So it is, if you look at the numbers and you look at statistics, but you also get women who they just say, look, it's what I've always been brought up to believe, and that's my. It's not really. It's not even religious. This is the thing. It's not based on religion. It's cultural.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good for us to talk about what the roots of different ideas are. When Richard Tice was saying last week, we don't have people wearing burqas here because this is a Christian country, I'm thinking, okay, well, what do you mean by that? Because ultimately, most people in our country aren't adhering to Christianity, and it was Pentecost on Sunday, and that's the day on which we remember as Christians that people heard about Jesus in all sorts of different languages. This was shortly after Jesus had risen from the dead, and disciples were telling people the news about him, and this miraculous thing happened where people from lots of different cultures and lots of different parts of the nation were hearing about the good news of Jesus in their own languages. And inherently Christianity is not a kind of monocultural thing, and so when I hear people kind of conflating culture and Christianity in the way that I think Richard Tice is kind of doing, it kind of bothers me, because I think that's not. I do think that Christianity doesn't support wearing a burqa, because I don't think that God intended for us to cover our faces all the time. But I also think it's not. We shouldn't conflate culture and religion, and we should talk about why people believe the things that they do, and maybe hear them out, but not overlook the reality that there's this risk of coercion, and I think we need to be sensitive to that because I do.
Well,
think
I
that's
mean,
a real
there's
risk.
some of the. I won't even give him a name. One of the most disgusting. I think he's in prison at the moment. Muslim men who claims to talk for Islam has said that British women shouldn't be allowed to cycle, shouldn't be able to ride a bike because it incites sexual desire in men. I mean, I think the problem here is with the men. If seeing somebody stumble around on a bike is going to sexually arouse you, I mean, that is a real problem. And if seeing a woman's face is going to turn you into a rapist, then you're the problem, mate, not the woman's face. That's what I'd say. Grace, thank you very much indeed. Ali has called from West Yorkshire as a British Muslim. Ali, thank you for calling. I always love talking to you.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So what do you think about this? I mean, this conflation, as Grace was just talking about, between it's a religious requirement to wear these face coverings. I've spoken to imams, I've spoken to people with Muslim women and Muslim men who say it really isn't.
Yeah, exactly. I think Grace was right about it's not a religious thing at all. It's a cultural thing that's been imported. And personally, I really don't agree with it at all. Like, thankfully, no women in my family or anything, women that I know that wear it. I don't agree with it at all. Personally, I'm not someone who is a British Muslim, so I don't agree with it.
It's interesting. I did the phone in on the burqa many years ago at a different radio station, and I did have husbands phoning me and saying, my wife insists on wearing it, but I don't require her to. Why? It's a symbol to me of subjugation. It's a symbol of being less than. It's a symbol to me of being. It's misogynistic in its entire design. I don't understand why some people would choose to wear it. Some women would choose to wear it.
Yeah, I agree. I really, I don't think women in this country should be one. However, we're not gonna sit and be lectured by politicians and these parties that have supported Israel's war crimes and crimes against people like us. We're not going to sit and be listening to lecture by them. But in terms of the burqa, I do agree. I feel like it is the time probably to ban it, maybe, or certainly restrict it in public areas, maybe. So that's what I think. Yeah,
there is an increase in women, I say, choosing to wear it. But it is. You look at Afghanistan. I can't bear what's going on.
Oh yeah, it's horrific, absolutely horrific.
It breaks my heart what they're doing to women there, and that to me is the symbol of that's what the burqa.
Oh, they're just vile.
Disgusting
terrorists that come from the Stone Age, and
they're saying that it's religious. It's not religious at all.
No. Honestly, we've had this debate in my own family, but there's so many misogynists who come from our religion, and they hide behind religion and cultural things to hide their own hatred and their own, just the way they don't respect women, they don't respect minorities.
I think they fear women. I think that those men fear women. I think they're trying to subjugate them because they know that women are special.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to make a quick point on the LA thing, the riots that are happening there. I think I totally support all the protesters what are going on in LA, and I think they're brilliant. They're standing up to what I believe now America's the Trump. They're a fascist government, so I totally support the people in LA. I do. Just wanted to say that.
Well, no, that's great. We have listeners across the pond, and I support them as well. In case you hadn't guessed.
Thank you.
Ali, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. I don't support rioting. Didn't support it in this country, won't support it there, but I do support them standing up for what they believe. Quick break, back in a sec.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good morning. It's Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock, and we're talking about the burqa because it has been much in the press recently, and I sort of put off having this call because I've done it before as a phone-in, and I found it really fascinating, but it just sort of traumatises me a little bit because I did wear one for a few hours, and I'm not joking, I did find it incredibly, I mean, I've done some really quite traumatising things in my life, but that was one of the most traumatising. Alison has said, when it comes to the burqa, I worry more about the security implications. It's going to take a terrible terrorist attack by somebody wearing a burqa for the government to do something. That's from Alison, and we do know that the robbers, do you remember that case a while ago where the burglars were men? They broke into a jewellery shop, I can't remember, but they dressed in burqas to escape. It's brilliant. Who's going to stop them? Who's going to ask them? So, yeah, it is a ploy that has been used. Joanna says, when you say Muslims want their wives to take off the burqas and they won't, it's because a lot of them are so afraid of being ostracised from their social group. And that's what I mean by choice. Is it really a choice? Or will they be, you know, pushed out from their social group with perhaps older women who have always worn the burqa and so don't see any reason to change that. So that's what I mean about if it is real choice, then I can't imagine why. But if it is your choice to do it and you're not working as a teacher or a doctor or a nurse or somebody like that, then fine, you crack on. I just worry that it isn't real, genuine choice. And then she goes on to say, I had what I thought was a little chubby Saudi girl staying with me years ago. One evening when there were no men in the house and this tiny girl came down in leggings with the most beautiful hair that she'd had hidden. I swear she was barely a size 4. She had on so many layers normally, leggings, 3 skirts, shirt, sweater, hijab. And when it was all removed, there was nothing of her. It was with respect and how she was expected to dress according to her culture. This burqa, etc., is the same. Muslims will, however, respect a law of the land that tells them not to wear it, though. So it is the only way. Gary said, I do think it should be banned, especially for the sake of the women wearing them. It's demeaning. Nowhere in the Quran it says it must be worn. Plus, I think it's bad for societal integration and security reasons and should definitely be banned in schools. Many countries in the Middle East and Central Asian countries have also banned it. On the flip side, European women have to cover up their bodies when visiting certain countries. I mean, that is true. That is true. You know, I suppose what he's saying is when in Rome, you know, you're in a country where it's not necessary, not required, so you don't have to do it. There you go. Terry is in Dover. Hi, Terry.
Good evening, Petrie.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. You?
Good. Yeah, very well, thank you. What do you think? Is it time to take the step and to ban this item of clothing?
I've been listening to your summing up was very good, and Grace was very good, and the points just made just now were very good. On the security issue, I think that's the central point here, isn't it? You know, there are so many street robberies now. There's so many shops being raided by people with face coverings, balaclavas, and things like that. I mean, you know, obviously, it doesn't need to be a woman, of course. It can be a man dressed in a burqa. And, you know, as I was thinking that, waiting to come on to speak to you, I was thinking, yes, ban all face coverings in public, but what about in extremely cold weather? People like to put things across their face, and, you know, if you stop them doing it, they could get flu or something, you know. It's a very difficult one all round.
I mean, it is, and I do take your point, because if we say we're going to ban all face coverings all year round, I mean, I don't know whether we're a country that bans things like that. I mean, I don't like this item of clothing. I think it stands for everything that's wrong with the way women are treated.
Repression.
Yeah, it is just awful.
Yeah.
But then you have certain Jewish communities that women shave their hair off and then wear a wig. You know, you have various other people who do things that I think are religiously odd. Right? And you think, well, why would you do that? I mean, that is just... But I suppose it's not a face covering, but are we going to start meddling with other people's religious or cultural beliefs?
I just think about the security and privacy aspect of it. That's just, I come back to that point all the time. Some people say that why can't they just wear the burqa in the home? But that just defeats the purpose of it, because it's in public, isn't it?
Yeah, they take it off when they're at home.
Yeah. I mean, is it really motivated by their husband, their partner? Is it all motivated by men?
Well, originally, yes, and culturally, it is sustained because women don't want to be ostracised. I mean, you look at women in Saudi Arabia and countries like that, and when they come over to the UK, I mean, I've seen them in Marks and Spencer's on Oxford Street, great big gaggles of them, all covered from head to toe, their eyes covered, even the mesh.
It makes you feel very uncomfortable, doesn't it?
Well, I'm just thinking, I mean, I'm going to be honest, I did think, why are you buying all those lovely clothes? I mean, who sees them? You never uncovered. And you see them in restaurants in certain areas as well, having to feed themselves under the covering.
Oh, really? Yeah.
In restaurants, because unless they're in an all women's area, but even then you might have men walking past. So you see them trying to feed themselves underneath the covering.
I thought the mouth was exposed, actually, isn't it?
No,
covered as well.
No. I'm talking about the full covering. The full covering.
Obviously, just the eyes, just the slits of the eyes. Yeah.
Just the eyes, and sometimes there's mesh there as well.
Yeah. Oh, Christ.
To prevent you seeing their eyes. I mean, that is extreme. But you just look at the coverings in places like Afghanistan, and these women, there's nothing of them, and in fact they're not even allowed to speak in public anymore. So they're not allowed to talk to each other in public now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I don't see it as a symbol of as anything but severe oppression. But then...
Yeah. You mentioned earlier on that there's nothing in the Quran which says, about a full face covering. And so I was just thinking, you're talking about choice, and you think, no, it must be repression, the men. But the women can't even say that, oh, well, we're doing it because of religion, can they? Because you're saying that it's not mentioned.
It's not mentioned. No, the Quran merely mentions maybe covering your hair for modesty.
That excuse is not open to them.
No, it really isn't. But it's cultural, and it's been, like female genital mutilation is cultural. It doesn't make it right, but it is something that has happened traditionally through generations, and they don't see any reason to change. And some men won't accept a bride who hasn't been mutilated. So some men won't accept a bride who hasn't always covered herself. So if you want to get married, you kind of have to go through these awful things. Is it choice? No.
No.
That's what I think. Terry, good to talk to you. Thank you. Sarah is in Liverpool. I think last word goes to you, Sarah.
Hi, Petrie.
Hi.
Over the burqa. I mean, as you rightly said, that it doesn't say in the Quran you have to be literally covered from head to toe. No. It's got to be modest dress. It's got to be, and if you cover your hair, fine. I mean, when it was originally come out all those years ago, it was Islam came about in the Middle East. Lots of sand. It was practical to keep the sand out of your hair, and also to make sure you didn't get sand in other strange places. But it's a choice. Now, if a girl or a woman chooses to be modestly dressed, and that's fine. That's okay. If she chooses to wear the burqa of her own free will, then okay. But my worry over all of this is if she's doing it to hide the bruises from her, shall we call him a husband in loose terms, because no real man goes around beating up on his missus.
Well, do you remember that little girl that was killed by her father. What was her name? Sarah?
Yeah, little Sarah.
Sarah Sharif.
She was in was one of the suburbs of Outer London, wasn't it?
Yeah, and she wasn't wearing a face covering, but she was wearing, I think it's called the niqab, where it's the whole...
Yeah, you just see the face, but not
the neck.
Covered.
The neck was covered, all of her, side of her face and the top of her head, and that was covering bruises, and also the rest of her clothing was like the beginnings of learning to wear a burqa, right? That's the only way I can put it. And it was covering abuse. It was covering beatings.
And that's my worry.
Yeah, and these women, when we say choice, when you're likely to be ostracised by other women in your social group who perhaps a bit older, perhaps come from that more traditional background, is it really a choice? And how much of it has been imprinted on you from being a little girl, that's the only way to be modest. So it's grooming. It is
grooming. I'll be the first to say, if someone's saying you've got to wear this, you've got to wear that, no matter what it is, it could be in the